We return with our two political science professors, Scott Buchanan with Georgia College and State University, Dr. Charles Bullock with the University of Georgia. Let's go ahead and piggyback on that conversation about election integrity and the safety of our vote. Georgia was put in the spotlight with the last presidential election. Has it really helped enhance the security of our elections? Dr. Buchanan?
I would argue yes, it has. And one example of that is all the precautions that are now being taken with protecting ballot boxes, to having tallies come in at 8 o'clock tonight of those early votes, and also the absentee ballots, to know how many ballots were cast early, so that there's for the public's confidence, they know how many ballots have been cast.
And then you have this paper trail as well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, Dr. Bullock, you wanted to weigh in.
Yeah, no, we actually had very secure elections 4 years ago, and some people didn't think so. But when we went through and did a hand count of those 5 million ballots, it essentially showed the same thing as was coming off the readers from having had the ballot scanned. So, yeah, historically, there was a lot of funny business that took place, particularly in rural parts of Georgia.
Sure.
But that was a while back,
While
So,
back.
yeah, right. So.
Yeah, and Georgia has been under the spotlight when it has come to voting because of the history of the state, and now we have very secure elections. Is more of that a PR kind of move, or do you think it really helps and enhance the process?
Yeah. Well, until 24 years ago, until 2000, nobody gave a thought about what happens once you cast your ballot. And then down in Florida, the whole thing gets decided by 527 votes.
Hanging
Yeah, right. So what happened here, and was this fair, and everything? So that's what really began to focus Americans on. Maybe there is something that happens once you walk away from your vote, and so that then did build some concern about what happens. Let's look at this.
Or do you think we have more people engaged though? Because I remember, with elections, no one, we were always talking about low, voter apathy, and now more and more people are actually interested not only in voting but the whole process behind the vote.
Well, if you look in the as recently as the 1990s, even the early 2000s, if we hit 45, 47, 50% turnout, wow,
That's huge.
That's huge historically in this state. But we've seen a steady trickle up in the last several presidential election cycles, higher and higher turnout. So yeah, I would say the voters are much more interested than they have been historically.
Yeah, and it's kind of like in the sporting things. If your team is out of the pennant race early on, who wants to go to the ball game? Where if you're fighting for the pennant or whatever, then you're more like participating. So since Georgia is now one of the 7 toss-up states, people who would otherwise be apathetic say, well, gee, they're hearing so much about it, not necessarily on the media, but their friends, when they're out to lunch or something like that. Somebody, well, have you voted? And so that social pressure may also kick in and get you to go to the polls.
Speaking of social pressure and social media, I'm sure you guys have received a whole bunch of text messages. I know I have too, and I don't remember beforehand getting so many text messages from both candidates. For these different committees. What do you think about that, Dr. Bullock?
Yeah, well, what is being discovered is that particularly for the younger voters, you've got to do more than simply run ads on television. You can run $10 million behind an ad and go and talk to a group like Scott and I have in our classes, and not one of those kids will have seen it. Nobody. And I've been noticing that now for 10 years. So my guess is folks who were 20 at that point are now 30 and probably still are getting their information through some kind of social media. And so increasingly we're going to see money spent on those various means of getting that information out.
The battleground is now on our phones.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Thank you so much. We will talk again soon.